Hey there. Welcome to First Look. It's gonna rain like any second, I have a feeling, so I'm inside. All right. So, first look. Here we go. What do we got today? We're still in First Samuel. I love First Samuel. I like anything that has to do with Samuel. I think because Samuel has, again, I think we get to see this kind of longer narrative with him. But I also just like the number of different types of emotions and things that he goes through, and we can identify with Samuel kind of however we want to. Meaning, Samuel isn't really depicted as this hero that we're supposed to emulate, that we're supposed to connect with in a particular type of way. He plays a role, and he plays a faithful role. But that doesn't mean that doesn't make mistakes. It doesn't mean that he's not prone to doing something wrong. He's wise, and he's someone that, God calls upon to do what needs done. But then we get to kind of draw our own conclusions when it comes to how we feel about him and how we feel about what he's trying to navigate. And what we've gotten to see along the way are these, what I really like is that Samuel ends up having to do things that he doesn't want to do. I mean, he really doesn't want to do. He doesn't want to choose a king. And we saw this past week how I was talking about, the struggles of that, and him trying to say, look, this is not going to go well, and here are all the things that are going to happen, and the people saying we don't care about that, we want this anyway. And, he serves them then the best he can, knowing, hey, this isn't going to go well, so I'm not just washing my hands of you, because what you would see if you were to read the chapters between the one that we had for last week, which must have been chapter 8, I think. Is it 7 or 8? We're now maybe another 8 chapters ahead, end of chapter 15 into chapter 16. So now in those chapters, we've gotten to see what is this Saul character like. They choose Saul. I think they just choose him because he's tall. I think that's a big part. Like, he literally stands a head above the other people, and so I think they literally just choose him because he's the tallest, which I guess I've heard of worse reasons of choosing a leader, but that's not a great one. What happens is what they kind of say. It's not that Saul is completely incompetent. It's not that he isn't working hard or trying to be, faithful most of the time. It's just that how do you know how to describe it? I think Saul kind of rules with this, like, shoot first, ask questions later kind of a feel to it. Like, he uses a sledgehammer when something, more delicate could be done. He's not the diplomat. He's not but what you find is, which is probably one of the most important elements of this, and maybe I'll try to cover it in the sermon, is that Saul has a very dedicated following, which makes sense, right? When you think about, imagine for a second that you were desperate for a king, okay? And so a king is crowned. Samuel crowns this king. And you have dedicated your life. You wanted a king so badly. You dedicated your life to this king. The king and now you're so dedicated to this king that it's not, the king isn't like a servant of the people. You're a servant of the king. And so most of Israel becomes extraordinarily loyal at least from a tribe standpoint, to Saul. Because what you kind of miss along the way, because it kind of gets, I think, buried in the details of a lot of the Old Testament that we read, is that what happens between 1 Samuel and into really into the time of David and Solomon, and then afterwards, is that you kind of get a division, a clear division between 10 tribes. I think it's Judah and Benjamin who are the other tribes. So there's 10 tribes that are very pro Saul. And then there are 2 tribes that become very pro David. And that kind of stands even after they're gone, right? After, I mean, like, that loyalty stands for a very long time. So I honestly can't remember what tribe, I just have to look it up, what tribe Saul is from. But of those 10 tribes that are stay loyal to him throughout, they are the ones, those 10 tribes are the tribes that become the northern kingdom. So let me back up for a second. So just to remind you what happens. After Saul comes David. David unites everyone, right, into one, you know, like further unites them, I guess you could say. They were one kingdom, but he kind of solidifies that, you know, changes everything. They go from struggling to like this, you know, they kind of become what Israel wanted to become, which was this grand, you know, force, unified force. So they're, you know, this united kingdom under David, and then of course under Solomon. And so the people who, when that happens, when we go from Saul to David, and this is the story you're going to see, Samuel doesn't want to do this, doesn't want to go and anoint a new king, because Saul, of course, is still alive. And Saul has children, and, you know, those children, you know, by birthright, you would imagine would become king. And so, you know, there's a whole legacy that's been, you know, started here, where if Saul is king, you would assume his line would be king. And then plucked out from nowhere, you have this kid, David. He's not even the oldest son, you know, he's not even a prominent figure. He's a shepherd out, you know what I mean? So Samuel chooses this king, or this anoints this would-be king, and Saul has to figure out how to navigate that in a way that, you know, it's not going to make him happy. And so they have this rivalry, which we're not there yet, but this throughout the rest of Saul's life, and eventually, of course, Saul dies in battle, and that's when David takes over. But it's a tense, let's just say, tense thing to see. And eventually, what happens is you go from David to Solomon, and then after Solomon, the people who were for Saul this whole time, who reluctantly agreed to, you know, stay unified under David and Solomon, basically because they were better off that way, see their moment to basically divide the kingdom into two. And so the Saul people, the people who favored Saul, take the north, and which was strategically advantageous because it had a lot more resources, at least, you know, natural resources. Now, the David people, Judah, Benjamin, those tribes, they kept Jerusalem, so, which of course is ridiculously important. But we see the north become much more, it's bigger. Again, it has more resources. It becomes lucrative. It starts making a lot of those deals with other tribes and other peoples. And so that's where we see it get into trouble, and where we see, the exile take place, because God wasn't happy with Israel. So now in that case, we have Israel in the north, Judah in the south. And they got taken into exile. And then, of course, the same thing happens to the south as well, but it happens about 140 years later. So that's where everything goes. And it all starts right here with this decision that Samuel has to enact by choosing another king while Saul is still alive. Which, even if Saul wasn't alive, again, his family line would have assumed that the next son would be the king. And, choosing someone else was not... It's tricky business. So I'm going to read this to you because I'm in the church and I can read the passage for you without having to memorize it. So here's the text. It's 1 Samuel chapter 15. It's right at the end, which is verse 34. And it moves into chapter 16, going to verse 13. So 1 Samuel 15, 34 through chapter 16, verse 13. Then Samuel went to Ramah, and Saul went up to his house in Gibeah of Saul. Samuel did not see Saul again until the day of his death, but Samuel grieved over Saul, and the Lord was sorry that he had made Saul king over Israel. Now, that skips a lot, but I can try to fill in the gaps for you on Sunday. So this is David being anointed as king. The Lord said to Samuel, "How long will you grieve over Saul? I have rejected him from being king over Israel. Fill your horn with oil and set out. I will send you to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I have provided for myself a king among his sons." Now that would have just shocked Samuel to death. Samuel said, "How can I go? If Saul hears of it, he will kill me." And the Lord said, "Take a heifer with you and say, I have come to sacrifice to the Lord." So here's your cover. "Invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show you what you shall do, and you shall anoint for me the one whom I name to you." So Samuel did what the Lord commanded and came to Bethlehem. The elders of the city came to meet him trembling and said, "Do you come peacefully?" What's going on here? He said, "Peacefully. I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Sanctify yourselves and come with me to sacrifice." And he sanctified Jesse and his sons and invited them to the sacrifice. When they came, he looked on Eliab and thought, "Surely the Lord's anointed is now before the Lord," meaning Eliab the son. This should be the one. But the Lord said to Samuel, "Do not look on his appearance or on the height of his stature, because I have rejected him, for the Lord does not see as mortals see. They look on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." Then Jesse called Abinadab and made him pass before Samuel. He said, "Neither has the Lord chosen this one." And then Jesse made Shammah pass by. And he said, "Neither has the Lord chosen this one." Jesse made 7 of his sons pass before Samuel. And Samuel said to Jesse, "The Lord has not chosen any of these." Samuel said to Jesse, "Are these all of your sons here?" And he said, "There remains yet the youngest, but he is keeping the sheep." And Samuel said to Jesse, "We'll send and bring him, for he will not sit down until he comes here." He sent and brought him in. Now he was ruddy and had beautiful eyes and was handsome. which I always thought when I read this before, I was like, why are they mentioning this? Because it just says a second ago that God does not choose based on outward appearances. It's like the author couldn't help but put that in for, I don't know, our sake, Samuel's sake. Like Samuel must have thought this was the one, and just to kind of prove the point that, like, yeah, we can't get away from that, can we? The Lord said, "Rise and anoint him, for this is the one." Then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the presence of his brothers. And the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon David from that day forward. Samuel then sent out and went to Ramah. Now the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul. Oh, hold on one second. Am I reading? No, that's where I'm reading to. Sorry. Let me stop right there. Okay. All right, there we go. So, it's kind of interesting to try to figure out who to identify the most with in this story. One, it says something about God, obviously, that God is choosing this one that God was not supposed to choose, because, of course, God was supposed to choose the oldest or the tallest or the whatever. God does choose an attractive young man for whatever reason. Again, I am always confused by that. I'm going to have to do a lot of research on that because I find that part fascinating. That the verses just get done saying God doesn't look at that. And then what does the author say? Oh, well, he is a looker. Okay, what? We just talked about that. Like, could you get over it? And I think that point is important. But I'd like to do a little research on it. I don't know what it's like to be David in this situation, where you're just a kid who was tending sheep and then all of a sudden you're being anointed by some old man to become the next king over the people. And I don't even know if you know what that means. I don't know what it's like to be Jesse, because now, of course, he's got this son who is being chosen, and what is he supposed to do with him? You know, because now Jesse probably feels like, well, the king is going to hear about this and he's going to come and kill me or kill my sons or kill my family or, you know, something. He's going to do something bad to me. Because if Samuel was thinking that, like, I mean, I can't imagine what Jesse was thinking. So, my natural inclination, at least off the top of my head, is to say, I don't know what this is like for Samuel. And the angle I'm thinking of, at least the first thing that kind of comes to me, is what does it take to do the things that we know are faithful that we don't want to do? And because that's exactly what Samuel is doing here. It takes, I think I called this sermon emotional fortitude. Because there's obviously a lot of elements to life that need our attention, that need us to not be comfortable so that we can do them. And I think that's such a kind of amazing place to think and to spend some time, because we avoid what is uncomfortable so much of the time. And yet that's really where I think so much of our attention needs to be. And, you know, I avoid pain and suffering as much as you do. I avoid, you know, uncomfortable situations where I have to, or where I can. But of course, there are situations, whether it's in this job or in my own personal life or whatever, where I have to be willing to make people feel tense, say what people don't want you to say. And I think a lot of us did that in many capacities during the pandemic. I think that's like a natural example for me, is we all had to say no to things that we didn't want to. You know, we didn't gather in this place, in this sanctuary, at least not in person, for over a year. And we did that because we were trying to listen to the science around us and the experts around us and the legal folks around us, and keep people safe and keep people from, getting really sick. And it was hard, and we didn't all agree on, and I'm sure there's lots of things that we would try to do differently in retrospect if we had the knowledge that we have now. But we also have vaccines and that kind of thing, and things are different. But they don't train you for that. So we're making it up as we go along. But the tension of having to say no, or not yet, or almost, but not there, but yes, but only in this kind of way. Boy, I mean, it was trial and error for sure. And we really tried to make it. We really tried to make it work, but it wasn't easy. And I hope that we never have to do it again. But it was those kind of moments that I was so grateful for this collective wisdom in the room that was willing to say, look, yeah, this is hard, and sometimes we have to say no, or sometimes we have to say not yet, or whatever, or only in this way, or only in that way. But we have to stick together, and we have to care for each other, and we have to care for people who are vulnerable. And you may not get sick, but we don't know how sick that person could get, or that person could get, because we didn't know what we know now. And so we were all just trying to be kind. and that was hard. But you have lots of things like that in life that you have to, you have to say no to, or you have to do that you don't want to, but is the faithful thing to do. And I think that one of the lessons that I learned about that is that when you see people have to make decisions that are hard, that we try to be as supportive of that as we can, even if we disagree with them. I think that's a big piece of it for me, is that I've known people that have had to say, no, I can't do that, or no, I can't do that now, or I want to, but I can't, or, well, no, I can do this, but not that. And, trying to make that process not as stressful for people. And sometimes people have had to make decisions where they've had to, take another job, or move, or do something else. And, they come to you and they say, I'm going to do this thing. And then you want to say, I understand, because taking another position or whatever, isn't easy. And we've had, folks in this church who have, taken new jobs, or retired, or, done things like that. And, you want to make that the least amount of painful as you can, because it's hard for them, because they don't want to disappoint you, or they don't, want to make your life harder, or whatever it happens to be. But I want to kind of think through, I think, what is this like for Samuel, to have to find the strength from within to do what he feels is right, or that God is saying is right, and be willing to take a risk and not run in the other direction. It's a little bit like centuries later, we'll see kind of the antithesis of that would be like Jonah. I never really thought about that. But both Jonah and Samuel get this message of, you have to go and do this thing that you do not want to do at all. And Samuel would not have wanted to do this at all. And Jonah definitely didn't. And Jonah runs in the other direction when Samuel doesn't. And, on Sunday I compared Samuel's situation with choosing a king, similar to Jesus trying to show people a different way when it came to what the kingdom of God could be. No, I'm not going to be the ruler like you wanted. The kingdom is something else. You think about, naturally the first thought that comes to mind is Jesus saying yes to knowing that the crucifixion was not something he could avoid. Having to do that which was for the greater good, which would only do him harm. And so you sort of see that played out in Christ's life. And what is that? Again, what does being willing to do that which we don't naturally want to do, what does that feel like? What kind of things come up? Where do we find the strength? How do we help each other in those moments? That's the kind of thing I'm kind of thinking about with this week. But again, I don't know where this is going to go. This is the first look. Who knows? Anyway, look at the passage. Do yourself a favor, I think, and look at, this will help you. If you go from where we left off with Samuel telling the people, you don't want to do this, and they're like, we want a king. Go from there, which again, I think is around chapter 8, wasn't it? To where we are now, and just see what happens. What happens with Saul? That way it'll give you kind of a context for what all this looks like, because it's a huge part of their history, right? It kind of gets lost because we do so much focusing on David and Solomon, and for all the good reasons that we do. But then when everything breaks down and falls apart after Solomon, it's because of this. It's because of this moment when the people realize Saul and his family are not going to be it from now on, and everything is going to change. And 10 out of the 12 tribes are mad for a long time, and they finally get their revenge after Solomon's death. It's fascinating. Okay. I'm going to let you go. Thanks for doing this with me. I turn the lights off. Thanks for being willing to think through this story with me. Thanks for being you. I hope that you have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next time for another First Look. Take care.